Welcome to today's tutorial where we will create a simple 2D shooter game using Java. In this video, we will go through every aspect of the game development process, from setting up our environment to implementing the game mechanics. We'll make it an exciting journey, so let's get started. First, ensure you have Java Development Kit, JDK, and an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse installed on your machine. If you haven't set them up yet, do so now, and we'll proceed once you're ready. Now that we have our environment set up, let's create a new Java project. In your IDE, create a new project called Simple 2D Shooter. Once the project is created, let's structure it properly. We'll create the following folders: src for our source code, assets for images and sounds, and lib for any external libraries we might use. In this tutorial, we will use the Java Swing library for our graphical user interface and game loop. You might want to search online for Java Swing tutorial if you're unfamiliar with it. But don't worry, I will guide you through each step. Let's start with our main game class. Here, we are creating the main class called Game. Inside the main method, we create a JFrame, which serves as our main window, and we add a JPanel to it, where all our game components will be drawn. We also set some properties like the title, default close operation, and make the frame visible. Now, let's implement the GamePanel class where we will handle the game's mechanics and rendering. Create a new class called GamePanel and extend from JPanel. We will override its paintComponent method, which is where our game graphics will be drawn. In the GamePanel constructor, we set the preferred size for our game window, set the background color, and make the panel focusable. The StartGame method initializes and starts the game loop in a separate thread. In the run method, we continuously repaint the panel to create the animation effect. Now that we've set up our main classes, let's introduce a player character to shoot enemies. We'll create a new class called Player. This class will handle the player's attributes and behaviors, such as movement and shooting. Let's also define a basic property for player position. In the Player class, we define the player's X and Y coordinates, width, and height. We include a move method to update the player's position based on user input. The draw method utilizes graphics object to draw the player as a blue rectangle in our game panel. Next, we need to instantiate our player in the GamePanel class. Add a player object as an instance variable and initialize it in the constructor. Let's also handle keyboard input to move the player character left and right. In the player's constructor, we initialized it at x equals 375, y equals 500. We also added a key adapter to listen for key presses, allowing us to move left or right by 5 pixels. Don't forget to import necessary packages like key adapter and key event. After handling movement, let's draw the player in the paintComponent method. Call the player's draw method inside paintComponent so that it gets rendered on the screen whenever the panel is refreshed. At this point, you should now be able to move the player character left and right using the arrow keys. Now it's time to implement shooting. To do this, we'll create another class, Bullet, which will encapsulate the properties and behaviors of the bullet. The Bullet class initializes its position and visibility. The move method updates the bullet's position upwards and checks if it has gone off screen to set its visibility to false. The draw method, like the player, draws the bullet when it is visible. Now, let's track multiple bullets in the game panel. We can use an array list to store bullet objects. When the player presses the spacebar, we will create a new bullet and add it to this list. In the game panel, we initialize the bullets list. When the spacebar is pressed, we create a new bullet at the player's position. Note here we need the player's X and width to ensure that the bullet starts from the center of the player. Now, we need a way to update all bullets and draw them on the screen. In the run method of our game panel, we will iterate through the bullets, move them, and remove them if they are no longer visible. In the run method, we iterate through the bullets list. We move each bullet, check if it's still visible, and remove it from the list if not. This ensures our game remains efficient and doesn't run out of memory with unnecessary bullet objects. After updating the bullets, we also need to draw them in the paintComponent method. For that, we'll iterate through the bullets list again and call their draw method. Now run your application, and you should see your player shooting bullets upward when you press the spacebar. Next, it's time to introduce enemies to your game. We'll create an enemy class similar to the player and the bullet. In the enemy class, we set up X, Y, width, height, and visibility similarly. The move method determines the enemy's downward movement, while the draw method renders the enemy as a red rectangle. Now, we need to manage multiple enemies in our game panel. Just like bullets, we will create an array list for enemies. For simplicity, let's add new enemies at a random X position. The spawn enemies method adds 5 enemies at the top of the game area with a random X position. Remember to invoke this method inside the game panel constructor. Next, implement a method to update the enemies in the run method, similar to how we updated the bullets. As enemies move down, we will check their visibility and remove them if necessary. In this block of code, we iterate through enemies, move them, and check their visibility. Similar to bullets, we remove them if they go off-screen. This ensures our game stays responsive and fast. In the paint component method, we need to draw the enemies as well, just like we did for bullets. When you run your code now, you should see the enemies falling down the screen. The final step in our tutorial is implementing collision detection between bullets and enemies. We can create a collision check method inside game panel. In the collision check method, we iterate through the bullets and enemies, using the getBounds method to check for intersections. If a bullet hits an enemy, we set them both to not visible. We need the getBounds method in both the bullet and enemy classes. This will return a rectangle representing their hitbox for collision detection. Add the getBounds method to both classes now. After that, we'll call collision check at the end of the run method in game panel, right before the repaint call. Now your game should have basic shooting mechanics, a player, bullets, and enemies that move down the screen. Collision detection is set up between bullets and enemies. You can enhance it further by adding scores, levels, or sound effects. Thank you for following along with this tutorial. As a recap, we set up a simple 2D shooter game where you can move a player, shoot bullets, and recognize collision with falling enemies. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more programming tutorials. You can find the complete code in the description below. Happy coding, and I hope to see you next time.